Irregular Miniatures Incredibly Fast Napoleonic Rules by Ian K. and Company. Incredibly fast. I'll be the judge of that, or we'll be the judge of that in our next episode. I want to introduce this set of rules to you. I think we may have tinkered with this a little bit, but it's been years, and I wanted to crack it open. I mean, as open as you can crack a one-page rule set. Take a second look at it now that I've gotten a little bit more Napoleonic wargaming under my belt. You've seen here on the channel everything from Song of Drums and Shakos to this absolute gem, Absolute Emperor. It needs a little work, let's be honest. And stick a pin in it. We're going to come back to the Absolute Emperor here in a little bit. But before we do, I thought I'd just go ahead and talk about what this is. Let's just read the introduction. Thank you for buying this set of rules. Although 50 pence... All right, now this is a fairly old set of rules. And as we come out of the Biden economy, unfortunately, I think I probably spent $3 on these. I don't know what the exchange rate is between pence and dollars, but if you were to buy this now, it would probably cost you, I don't know, maybe even a whole £2. Whatever, be that as it may seem a lot for one sheet of paper, but remember, you're not paying for the paper, right? The paper is the cheapest part. You're paying for the brain power and the play testing. Okay, the editing, I mean, that's not always the case. Sometimes you're not paying for editing. But in this case, I think maybe you are. And then this is kind of a delightful little old school set of rules. Enjoyable games played over 2 hours. We're not going to be doing an 2-hour video. Don't worry about that. We're going to start off with something a little simple. Ground scale is 1 centimeter, 50 yards. Figure scale is 1 figure equals approximately 40 men. Well, 1 figure is 40 men. You know what we're doing. Look at that. See, this is, I'm doing like a, it's like 1 to 10. I'm probably doing like 2 to 1 scale. Because I've got a whole 3 brigades on here, or is that battalions? I always get my B words mixed up. So battalions are organized into brigades, right? So I got 3 battalions on this happy little fella here. Let's take a little closer look. At like 3 by 10, there's probably like 60 or 80 guys on here. These are 2mm figures by Irregular Miniatures, and he calls for 15mm figs. Yeah, we're going to be doing 2mm figures. As usual, when you do that, there's a little bit of squinting that you have to do, and not just looking at the figures. When it comes to the rules and how you show, how you represent these battles, we're going to have to get a little funky around the margins. But interestingly enough, this is not a game where you remove figures for casualties. The core mechanic of this game is a little thing called FDPs. Figure and, Figure and, it says it in here. I've read this a whole one time, so I'm kind of an expert at it. It's what does FDP stand for? Fatigue and damage points. There we go. Fatigue/damage points. Henceforth, FDPs. That's how I'm going to refer to it. So as your boys fight, for every round of combat they fight, they're going to draw an FDP. If they get pounded by the enemy, charging a battery of guns, they're going to accrue more FDP. And as those accrue, their combat effectiveness goes down. Kind of interesting. So we're going to be using casualty markers, really. But going back to the representation, he says here that this can be Irregular Miniatures blocks or strips. Now, if you're using the 2mm strips, he recommends that you just use these little strips themselves. Like one of these strips is going to be your brigade. And then you line them up, like you put like 3 to 6 down for infantry and 8 to 16 for cavalry. And that's how you represent your armed forces. Now, obviously, I have already mounted these on 1-inch bases. It works really well for a lot of different systems. And I am going to use a slightly different ratio. I am going to use, instead of 6 strips, 6 to 8 strips for infantry, I'm just going to use 3 bases. Well, hey, I mean, there's 9 strips on there, and this is essentially how we're going to represent 1 brigade. Wait, to get that, battalions are deployed. Battalions are deployed. Wait. We're not going to be doing infantry in order. Well, maybe we will. So, brigades. Infantry are 3 to 6 battalions, right? So I'm actually going to have 9 battalions, but really what I'm doing here is each of these bases, 1-inch bases, is going to be the equivalent of a strip. So we're going to call this 6 strips in this battalion. Then when we go to our cavalry, and they look a little something like this. Let me get them facing the right way. That's a gun. Wait a minute. Where'd my cavalry go? Oh, here we go. Here we go. We are going to use 4 bases, and that gives us a fairly standard ratio of frontage of 3 for the infantry to 4 for the cavalry. You'll notice that I have 2 different kinds of cavalry here. I don't have a whole lot of these figures. So maybe this is a leader, but leaders aren't really that big a deal in this game. You don't have like individual figures. You kind of can if you are playing this in 2mm. There are, in fact, I have to use one of these for my French. I don't have quite enough horsey boys for my French. So these are what your leader figures look like. See, there's 3. I just have a leader stand. So I'm going to use this for one of my French cavalry, but we'll take a look at that when we look at the actual scenario. What this does is, for those of you that haven't seen 2mm figures, what this does is it allows you to have your infantry in line or column, or even if you squint, this is where I was talking about, squinting at the figures, there's your square. Ironically enough, we have 4 bases for our cavalry, but cavalry don't form square. What are you going to do? Not a big deal. We can represent for our squadron, we can represent them in column, we can represent them a line abreast, and that's really the big core formations that you're likely to encounter in Napoleonics, right? Line, column, square. And of course our guns, our big boys, our big belchers, I just showed you one here. He calls for 2. I actually have not just the cannon, but I have the wagon train in support, and it looks a little something like this. And the nice thing is, on camera you can see we've got cavalry, infantry, and you'll be able to tell the difference between the guns. There's my front, and sometimes I wrote on the back just to remind myself that which is the ass and which is the elbows, right? Which way are we pointing here? So there's our guns, 2 to a battery, and we're good. Now all of our guns are going to be 9-pounders. There's reasons for that. Makes it simple. I don't have to worry about whether I got 6 or 9. The rules do allow for horse artillery versus heavy artillery. Everybody's got heavy artillery. If you're not playing a refight, points values can be right. We'll circle back around to that. And look, a 1-page rule set that even includes art. Man, what a value. What a value. What a great game. So let's take a look at the turn order. Orders, command, and control. And it's a pip-based system, very similar to Wargames Research Group. After you roll dice, so for every 6 brigades, you roll a d6. Now, that means that, well, okay, I guess we'll get to that. For every single, you roll a d6. So if you've got 20 brigades, you roll 3d6. That is the number of brigades or batteries that you can move, okay? So you can't move everybody. You're going to have to pick and choose. Over the course of 2 turns, you can move everybody, but you're going to have to kind of, leapfrog. Then you do movement. Then you do artillery shooting at ranges of greater than 2 centimeters. Movement is pretty standard. We're going to be using these things called centimeters. I don't know what that is. I don't speak communist. I believe in freedom units. But we'll go with it just out of respect to E and K. Rules as written. I'm a big rules as written kind of guy. Now, the deal here is when you move, obviously, if you're in column, you move faster. If you're in line, you move slower. You got a wheel. Right? There's nothing new here. Where it does get new is artillery fire at ranges greater than 2 centimeters. The thing is, when you move, you stop when you're within 2 centimeters of a group. So everybody moves, everybody stops 2 centimeters away from the nearest enemy. You don't charge home just yet. Then we do our artillery fire at ranges greater than 2 centimeters. Then we do close range firing and charge resolution. So here's where you have your choice of, do we want to stand there in line shooting at each other? Are we shooting at each other in line, or do I want to charge home? And we'll talk about shooting here in a minute. So you do all the shooting, and then anybody that charges home, you do hand-to-hand fighting, and then finally you do tests for routes. Before we can talk about how you actually do combat, we need to talk about how you build your forces and about this morale chart. This is the meat and potatoes of how good your crews are. When it comes to shooting and, I guess I do got to back up a step. When it comes to shooting and melee, you're going to roll a die. Infantry roll an average die. For those of you that are new to this, an average die is a 6-sided die, but it has a 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and 5. That's what's on the faces. mostly going to get 3s and 4s. Infantry are very reliable. They're not very swingy, as we say. You're not going to get those critical hits or critical fumbles. Cavalry and artillery, you roll the D6. That is a lot more swing. You get anything from 1 through 6 on those. Then you add your morale value, which is a mark of quality. Then you add whatever these little modifiers are. If you are, so when we are shooting, if we're in column, flank, cavalry, or square, you get +1. If you are in line, you get +2. If you are shooting at somebody in light cover, you get a -1. And your guns, now remember we have 9-pound guns, so we are going to have a +1 for each of our guns. There are also modifiers. If you have, remember we talked about FDP before, for every FDP you have, you're at -1. If you have, for example, an infantry at -5 FDP, the best they can do is 0, so you better hope they have some other modifiers in here. All right, so what does the morale talk about? So, so you're going to shoot at each other, and you're shooting back and forth, right? So we talk about morale modifiers. Infantrymen, not good at fighting, not good at shooting, right? It's all in the gun, in the cannons for them. Everything from poor regular infantry have a +1 on their combat rolls, and you get up to heavy dragoons, which will be 6. Guard cavalry +8. They are going to be a regular lawnmower, just chopping everybody down. The only thing they're going to struggle with is when they are going after infantry in square. So all of that comes into play. The rules do allow for support. If you've got a brigade behind somebody that's fighting, then you can add their morale score. All of these only apply once, no matter whether you have 1 or 2 units they're fighting. You might not want to do that, because whatever the results are affects both of those, both the lead and the support troops. Likewise, with hand-to-hand fighting, you get all these modifiers, right? So here we go. If you are infantry and you're attacking a square in melee, you are at +3. Oh, it turns out that if you've got 4 times as many guys attacking one side of a square, you're probably going to win. If you are cavalry pushing back infantry or cavalry, look at this. Cavalry versus infantry in square, -6. Yeah, don't do that, okay? Cavalry do not attack infantry in square. It's a bad idea. I'm looking at you, Marat. And then plus support. So the same thing works in hand-to-hand, right? If the brigade, so here's where the results come into play. So you're going to do your little roll-off, add your modifiers. And this is worded so strangely. Oh, I had to look at this. And I really hit, boy, it wrinkled my brain. I tell you what, brother. The only factor that applies to the, support columns is -1 FDP, right? So a support that's taken some damage, they're a little tired, a little sleepy. They're not going to be as effective at supporting, but that's fairly predictable, fairly understandable. So let's look at these results. If opposing totals are within 50% of each other, they may charge home or continue firing. So we're in the firing section. If you're within 50%. All right, well, and then it says, if one total is from 50 to 99% less than the other, then that force retires the total difference in centimeters, and the victor may occupy the vacated ground. So I think we need to grab some dice and really kind of noodle this out. What the heck are you talking about? Because the very next line here is the one that really made me go, what? That's a weird way of saying it. If one total is 100% less than the other, then he's routed. 100% less than the other? Ian, baby, what is you doing? What he means there is, if you double the result of your opponent, then you rout him. Just take him off the board. 100% less. I mean, that would be like 0, right? You'd have to get like a 0 score. Really weird. Okay, now once you've cut that Gordian knot and rephrased it in a way that's easier to pack into your brain pan, then you can see that what this 50 to 99% means. So if we're rolling and we get about the same, then this is where you can charge home or you can opt not to. When you have a result like, let's do a 4 will be easy, right? So 4 to 6, we got 50% more, right? Half of this added to it gives us a 6. Absent any other modifiers, assuming they have the same amount of, now that I think about it, This is very similar to A Song of Blades and Heroes because, did I tell you I haven't really played this game, so I'm kind of noodling through this here live on camera? You really do have to add your combat factors. Just for the sake of completing the thought on this, the black team, whoever rolled this die, would have to retire 2 centimeters. The white side could then immediately occupy the space that was retired. Okay? Then we have to test for routes. Any brigade, so if we double him up though, right? So we got our 3 and our 6, then this guy routes. And there is the possibility of that cascading failure that you sometimes see in these big line them up and shoot at each other battles. This unit is within 10 centimeters of a routing unit. So now our horsey boys here, there's a chance that they are going to see the line falling apart and decide that survival is the order of the day. And so you have to test, right? Oh, except a friendly infantry brigade of equal or lesser morale value route, it rolls against its own FDPs. So if they have 3 FDPs, you're going to have to roll kablow, and then you roll it on camera, you get a 2. So if you get your number of less than your number of FDPs, if it's less than or equal to, it also routes. And this is where, at a certain point, you are going to build up so many FDPs, 5 for the infantry, 6 for the cavalry, that they're just going to route. Like the first chance they have to route, they're going to do that. What does routing mean? I mean, I don't know. When pushed back, take a test, as in section 6. Oh, there's a nice little handwritten note. Look, Ian signed mine with a errata right on the sheet. That's what I call customer service. Got it. So even when you are pushed back in hand-to-hand fighting, you got to take a test. And again, every time you fight, you have at least 1 FDP. So that first combat, second combat, third combat, everybody is going to start routing right away. And there's probably a little bit more to this. It probably says somewhere in here what it means to route, but I haven't spotted that yet. I'm going to have to so the artillerymen can drag their guns 2 centimeters without hitching up. There are rules for, now here's another rule. If a brigade's opponent route, the player rolls against the victorious brigade's FDP to see if he pursues. If the roll is less than or equal to his FDPs, he must pursue. Oh. If it's above, then he can choose to pursue or halt. Oh, okay, that's good to know. So there's a chance that you get choose. And then you wheeling and limbering and unlimbering takes half a move. If you want to change formations, it's half a move. Blah, 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 blah. All right, no big surprises there. So what are we going to do with these rules? Sounds cool, Mr. Wargaming. Now what? Well, now what? I've said I'm not great at Napoleonics. If you want somebody that's really good at this, go talk to Jim Ozarski, right? He's Le Gascon, and is it Le? I think it's Le. It's not La, is it? I don't know. He could tell you. I'm still kind of learning, and I learn via play. You probably find that relatable. So I'm going to take advantage of the fact that Boyd Bruce here knows way more about Napoleonics than I do, and he gives us a wonderful little series of learning games in Absolute Emperor that includes orders of battle and objectives. I love that. That's great. We are going to do the Battle for Bumville 3. It's fairly big, and here's what it looks like in map form. The French have 2, what are those guys called? They are called 2 veteran infantry, so morale score of 3. They have 2 line dragoons, morale score of 5, and they've got a big battery of 3 artillery, 9-pounders, right? So if you use the little system that Ian gave us, and I didn't tell you what that was because you got to buy the rules. It's like $3, man. Don't be a cheapskate. Just get a copy. Throw them some support, would you? If you tally up that's going to be a 65-point force. They have to seize this town. This is Bumville right here. They got to grab it from the British. The British have 1, 2, 3 seasoned infantry. They only have a morale score of 2. They have a conscript infantry. I don't know, is this Portuguese allies maybe? They only have a morale score of 1. They've got 1 seasoned light cavalry, morale score of 4. So in a 1-to-1 fight, these guys are at a disadvantage. And they have 1 9-pound artillery battery. I should point out the artillery has a range of 36 centimeters. So what are they going to get, like 2, maybe 3 shots? Are we going to do an artillery duel? I don't know. I don't think there's any bonuses for moving along the road, so I may not even put these on. The trick is, per the rules, the French have to seize the town by the end of turn 15. This gets a little bit wonky because that turn 15 deadline is specifically catered and balanced for Absolute Emperor rules. Will it really work for E&K and Irregular Miniatures Incredibly Fast Napoleonic rules? Stay tuned, Wargamers. We'll find out in our next episode. The British have 46 points, so 67 to 46. They are outnumbered basically 3-2, which is probably not great for attackers. You usually want to have 2-1. Again, particularly given that when you are attacking somebody, and we're going to say that only one unit can be in the town and take advantage of that cover. Let's take a look at what that means within these rules. If you are shooting at someone that is in hard cover, we're going to call the town hard cover. We'll call the woods light cover. You are at -2. Now I want to circle back around to what these morale factors mean. If you have Dragoons attacking infantry, the Dragoons are going to be adding 5 to their roll. And oh, look, these infantry, these silly billies, they did not get into... Here's my little handwritten notes. This is what the force looks like. Great. That's great, isn't it? All right. These silly billies did not get into square. Uh-oh. So the cavalry are going to stop at 2 centimeters, and let's just assume that they charge home. By the way, you want to organize your line when everybody finally does come together in a series of 1-to-1 fights. Okay? So just bear that in mind. Now, the black dice for the horsies and the white dice for the boots, they're going to add, let's pretend these guys are our line dragoons. They're at 5, and our seasoned infantry are at 2. So we are going to add 5. Except remember what I said about infantry versus cavalry. I'm going to use the black die for the cavalry still, but our infantry uses this average die. See, it's got a 2, and it's got a 5, and then these other faces are 4, 4, 3, 3. So when we roll these dice, if we add 2 and we add 5, that's going to change our proportions. Our 100% becomes very different. So let's look at the worst case scenario for the infantry. Oops, they only rolled a 4. The worst case, these guys roll a 6. That means we get an 11 to 4. Obviously, we've doubled up. These guys are just gone. That does mean that we're going to have 1 FDP. Every round of combat, your guys get a little bit tired. I didn't see any way to recover those FDP. We may have to think about that. Maybe I will, if you can believe this. I'm not going to show you this, but Ian put his phone number on here. If there's anything you really don't understand, give me a ring. I'll be happy to help with it. 9 a.m. Can you imagine? This is, the guy put his phone number. Oh, man. This is clearly written pre-internet. That's just bonkers, although maybe it's a business phone number, so it doesn't matter so much. Still, I think it's impressive. Back in the day, when we lived in a high-trust society, it was great. But for the record, that's pretty obvious. Now let's look at the best-case scenario for our infantry. They roll a 5, which gives them a result of 7. And look, we'll just go ahead and put that down. So +2 for their morale, right? Then our... Oh no, I told you they were swingy. Look, the OR is the 1 die. That's Other Realms. It's my local game shop. But then we add the 5, and oh look, we got a 6 to a 7. The best that these infantry can hope for here is to stay within that 50%, where, and again, this is to start the turn off. They're 2 centimeters apart. So now, because they're within 50%, they can charge home. To give our infantry a fighting chance, let's suppose that they are in defensive formation. That is going to be a -1 to the cavalry. Although, because the cavalry are charging, they are going to be back to +1. So that will boost them back up to 5. So here we see that, again, the cavalry are going to win. Now, one of the differences here is that when you're shooting, you've got that, if you're within 50%, if you beat them by half again, but not double, then you push them back, right? That's in the shooting phase. In the melee phase, don't worry about that. It's just a question of whether you win, and then you're pushed back. The total's difference. So here we have our total difference of, well, that would be 6 to 7, but I think we're at additional plus... Oh, so we do have, so we can push these guys back to 1 centimeter. That's the only way you're going to win, and that's only going to happen one time in 12. Any other general result here, if we get 3 and 3 plus the 5, that's going to be 8 to 5, and the cavalry will be driving these guys back 1.5 centimeters. Then on the melee, it says, well, let's see. Can you pursue? I think so. Yeah, when pushed back, and then you have to make that morale check. So that's kind of the generalities of how this game works and our scenario. So we're done for today. When we come back next week, we'll play out the Battle of Bumville 3 using the 2 forces that I showed you, and we're going to go a little slow. It's going to be a little awkward. Just kind of bear with me. Just those of you guys that are really good at Napoleonics, just remember when you're down in the if I miss something when you're down in the comment section, don't accuse me of cheating. That's rude. That's not the kind of vibe it's not the culture we're trying to build here. Just be cool, man. Just help me out. I need it. I like that advice. And together everyone achieves more. Go team! Until next week, I'm praying for you.